Hello and welcome to the sewing tutorial on how to sew the Centli sweater. You can find the link to the PDF sewing pattern in the description of this video. The first step is to cut all paper pattern pieces in your size, and then you can get started with cutting them out of your fabric. Make sure to add your preferred amount of seam allowance. In my case, I'm using a seam allowance of 1 centimeter. Also, don't forget to mark your notches. Here I have all of my pattern pieces, the waistband pieces, the cuffs over here, the sleeves, the front and back, plus lining and the collar. And I also have my zip ties, which I'm going to use as boning for the corset version. I'm also going to use this knit interfacing for the front waistband piece. The first step is to sew the shoulder seams for the front and back piece and the lining for version Y. I'm using my overlock, but you can also use a zigzag stitch or any other stretch stitch on your regular sewing machine. I'm also cleaning up the outer edge of the lining pieces because my fabric frays a lot, but usually this is not necessary for knit fabrics. Now I'm sewing together the front and back piece at the shoulder seams, right sides facing each other. I've cut my knit interfacing and I'm ironing it on carefully while placing a cotton cloth in between to prevent it from burning. After 5 minutes of careful pressing, it's ready. The next step is to gather the front between these notches. I'm doing this on both sides on my regular sewing machine. Use the longest straight stitch to gather the fabric between the notches. Make sure to leave 2 long threads on each end to be able to adjust the gathers to make them fit to the notches on the waistband. Now we can sew the front to the front waistband by aligning the notches and centers. And I've already pinned the left side, and I'm also going to pin the right side right now. Now I've got it all pinned and it's ready to sew. Take your time to make the gathers come out really neatly when you're sewing this together. Now we do the same for the other front waistband piece, this time with the right sides facing the wrong side of the front piece. Next up, we'll attach the back waistband to the back piece. Now we have all waistband pieces attached. The front piece is sandwiched between them. The next step is to sew the sleeves to the bodice. When pinning, make sure to align all notches. There are 2 in the back, 1 in the front, and the center notch should align with the shoulder seam. And this is the result. Now it really looks like a sweater. The next step is to close the bodice and sleeves by sewing along this seam. I'm now sewing the cuffs. I fold them in half and sew the short sides together, creating a loop. Then you can turn it over and the cuff is ready for being attached. And now we do the same for the other cuff piece. When sewing the cuff to the sleeve, align the seams and slightly stretch the cuff to make it fit while you sew. As a beginner, I would recommend pinning it first. Here you can see the finished sleeve with the cuff, looking good. Now we get to the tricky part. Draw a line 7 centimeters plus your seam allowance down from the center on both the lining and main bodice piece. Then carefully cut into that line with your fabric scissors. Do the same on the front bodice piece. Now we can sew the collar piece to the lining, right sides facing each other. Pin them first because you will need to stretch the collar a bit to make it fit. I'm now sewing the collar to the front and back pieces, right sides facing each other. Again, there should be an opening at the front. And now I'm pinning the zipper, which is sandwiched between the lining and front piece. And the collar is folded over, so it's also sandwiching the zipper. I'm hand sewing the zipper first to make sure that it won't stretch while I sew it with my sewing machine. Remember to switch to your zipper foot. And I'm slowly sewing one side of the zipper. Now I've gone ahead and pinned the other side of the zipper. You will need to cut 2 small notches at the very bottom in order to sew the zipper fully on. I also hand sewed this side before sewing it on my machine. Be extra careful when sewing the bottom part of the zipper because the metal parts can break your needle. I'm using my hand wheel to sew this part. Really take your time. Now you can turn the lining back inside and reveal your neatly sewn zipper. Next, I'll top stitch the lining in place along the collar seam. And here you can see what it looks like from the inside. My zipper was a bit too long, but I can still cut it off later. Now I'm going to prepare the tunnels for the boning of the corset version. For this, follow the markings on the pattern piece of your size. I'm making size B, so these are the lines I need to sew. And just mark them on this side and also do it for the other side. So now I've drawn the lines onto my fabric and I'm just going to sew the tunnels with a straight stitch. Now I'm trimming my boning to the required length. Because the edges are a bit pointy, I'm also sanding them so that they won't damage my fabric. When inserting the boning, it should be at least 1 centimeter shorter than the original length so that you won't sew over them when attaching the bottom waistband. Lastly, let's get the bottom waistband ready for being attached. This is similar to sewing the cuffs. Sew together the short sides and fold it over in half. Then you can pin and sew to the hem of the sweater. You will also need to stretch it slightly. Be careful not to hit the boning with your needles. And the sweater is done! Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You can find more inspiration and sewing projects on my Instagram at Telabeja.